Conflict is the killer of both conversations and conversion. If you're not familiar with these 3 steps, both your conversations and your conversions are in jeopardy. I recently attended a training on conflict resolution, and I was rushing to my camera to share what I learned with you. My suspicion is if it helped me, not only in my business and my life, I feel certain it's going to help you. So I think you should stick around and listen to what I have to say on the matter. In this video, you're going to learn how to handle difficult customers with effective communication using the 3 steps I'm about to share with you. We're going to look at conflict recognition, conflict reviewing, and conflict management. Stick around if that's something that will help you in your life, career, and or business. Before we get into the 3 steps though, I do want to tackle a couple of concepts that I've spoken about frequently here on this channel because I think they are extremely applicable to your ability to take the 3 steps that I'm going to share with you. So the first one is that you really need to live your value. In living your value, you are understanding what it is you need to do and be your best self in order for you to show up and show out when you are showing yourself, engaging with your customers, your audience, your family, any relationship. That is going to be imperative when you are managing conflict. The next thing that I want you to remember is it's important for you to understand your communication style. Yes, you can look at it from the other side of the coin where you need to understand how other people communicate. Ultimately, both are necessary, but when you know your communication style, it makes it easier for you to then adjust what you need to say, or it makes it easier for you to adjust what you hear and how you hear it in order to ensure you are getting the most out of the engagement. At the same time, I think it goes hand in hand to talk about the idea of managing the volume of your personality. Here, I'm not telling you that you need to be someone you're not. What I'm telling you is you need to understand yourself enough, know yourself enough that you are able to adjust where necessary so that you are not personalizing things, you are not making things difficult, you are able to hear what is being going on, read the room, and adjust yourself accordingly for optimal success. Next is what I want you to remember is that it's important for you to fine-tune your emotional intelligence. I just spoke about being able to read the room, but additionally, you have to understand what it is that is necessary to reach people. Social skills, having empathy for other people, thinking about what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes instead of just commanding or demanding that things are done your way. Your emotional intelligence is super important in your ability to manage conflict. Lastly, I wanted you to remember, I said this in a video, I can't remember which one, but it might have been a podcast actually, where I talked about listening between the lines. There are a lot of things that happen within conflict management that are unspoken. We're going to talk about those in a moment, and you have to be able to listen between the lines. There are things that are not being said, but that are speaking volumes in certain conflicts, and you have to be aware of them, at least leave room, which is where the emotional intelligence comes in. You need to be able to leave room for the idea or the potential that whatever is going on is something that is between the lines of words that are actually spoken. Now, let's get into these 3 steps, and the first one is conflict recognition. All right, when it comes to conflict recognition, there are 5 types of conflict management that we're going to go over. And I have them here on the screen, and I'm going to read them because I want to make sure that I'm getting them right. Some of them are a little close, and I don't want to mess up the concept for you, so I'm going to read them off. But the first one is a competitive conflict management style. Within this style, one party pushes ahead with his or her own agenda, right, with no concern for the other party. That is when you are competing. That is the conflict management style that you could be in the middle of, that you may have to manage. The next one is a collaborative conflict management style. This is where there is a high concern for relationships and high concern for achieving one's own goals. So that's where you'll collaborate so that each party is going to benefit from something in some way. Well, I think the differentiator here is that you care about the other person, but you also care about achieving your own result as well. The next style is the avoidance style of conflict management. And this is one where the people involved, one has a very low concern for her or his ultimate goal or their ultimate need, and they have a low concern for the other person, the relationship that is being involved in this conflict. So if you're avoiding something, it means you don't really care about it. You don't care if the other person cares about it. You're just going to avoid it altogether. Then you have the accommodating management style. And this is where one party focuses on the needs of the other party, and they don't really have a dog in the fight. The ultimate end goal is just not as important to them as it is to the other party. And then lastly, you have the compromising management style. And this is where the focus is placed on achieving a reasonable middle ground where both parties win out. So the idea with these 5 conflict management styles is to identify where you are, which conflict style you're having to deal with. Is the person that you're talking to, is the conflict you're having to manage, is it a competition scenario? Is it a collaborative scenario? Is it an avoidance scenario? Is it an accommodating scenario? Or is it a place where people are willing to compromise? That is the first thing that needs to happen. You have to identify the style. Now, when it comes to conflict, it causes reactions. It causes defensive reactions a lot of the time. So that is something that you have to look out for. Additionally, it causes negative responses. We have a fight or flight mentality, which is activated a lot of times when it comes to conflict. Someone's either going to fight and you're going to run up against opposition, or they're going to flight, which is going to give you that accommodating or that avoidance mindset. So you have to be mindful of where these conflicts are falling with respect to the causes and the things, the reactions and the responses and things of that nature. Now, in this training, what I thought was so interesting was a metaphor that she used when it came to conflict. And she talked about the idea of how we remember things. We will go to bed at night and we may journal 5 great things that happened that day. And you might struggle to come up with 5 great things, but you will remember with certainty some of the bad things that happened to you that day. And she equated it to cookware, believe it or not. And she talks about bad conflict sticks to you like Velcro, whereas any good information that happens throughout the day, it sort of slides out of your mind like Teflon. And I thought that was such a great analogy because it really is true, and we do have to be mindful of that. Now let's move on to the next step, which is conflict reviewing. Here is where we have to identify, we need to look at the conflict for what it is, and we need to identify whether or not the conflict is benefiting you, and you also can find a pathway to benefit the other person. You have to identify whether or not the conflict you are managing, the 2 parties involved, if one is competing or if they're competing with one another, you need to review. So here you'll see a diagram of what this can look like on a chart. And on the y-axis is how you might be comforted. What's important to you? Like, how important is it for you to be comfortable? That's up the y-axis. On the x-axis, it is how important is the other person's outcome. So you have their needs versus your needs pretty much on this graph. So when you are reviewing the conflict, you'll see here on the chart where competitiveness, your priorities are much higher and you have less concern for what is going on with the other person. If it is a collaborative state, then you see it's off to the right where it's important to you, but it's also somewhat important to the other person. If it's an avoidance state, then you can see here on the chart where you really don't care much about it and you don't really care what the other person feels about it. It's lower on the totem pole. If it is an accommodating, then it doesn't really matter so much to you, but you can see how important it is to the other person. Therefore, you will give in and you will give that person what they need. And then right smack dab in the middle is the idea of compromise. And that is where you all want to win. Everybody gets something out of the interaction. So that is how you would resolve that conflict. Now that we have an understanding of what it looks like to recognize the different types of conflict, and we know sort of what we need to do to review it, to analyze it, to understand the best way to overcome it or to manage it, let's look at the idea of conflict management and what we can do. And the first thing I want to do is really give you a definition of conflict management. And it is the process of identifying, understanding, and effectively handling disagreements, aiming to minimize negative impacts and reach a positive outcome through communication and collaborative strategies. So how then do you manage conflict? Well, the first thing you can do is really know what you need to do to control yourself, which is where that whole idea of your personal framework comes in that I've talked about so often here on the YouTube channel. It is important for you to identify what your needs are, what you need to do and be your best, your communication style, how to manage the volume of your personality, because that will in turn help you to sort of take a beat when it's necessary, when conflict does arise, and that'll help you to not jump out of the gate too quickly saying things or doing things that you can't take back. So that's the first thing, control yourself. I want you to think about some of those red flags that when noticed can minimize or mitigate the conflict in the first place. And when conflicts do arise, you can pay close attention to the factors that were contributing to the conflict and maybe diffuse them a little bit easier. Maybe there are triggers involved, okay? When you are managing conflict with other people, it's a good idea to actually think about, like, how can you begin to get the focus on what the real issue is versus what the argument is about or what the conflict is about. Because oftentimes it has more to do with a trigger or, something that, really is not really what's being discussed, but something other than that. And so when you can identify some of those things, it's easier to mitigate or minimize the conflict. When conflict arises, I want you to pay close attention to factors contributing to the conflict and look at ways to, number one, diffuse, but to how do you diffuse it? What are some of the tangible factors that are involved in identifying some of these factors? An example of a tangible factor is anything that is essential and can be quantified or clearly defined when there is a conflict. So something like maybe there's a budget distribution issue, or maybe there's conflict with job responsibilities. Those are tangible factors that you can identify. The next factor after tangible factors are those intangible factors. And that's what I was talking about, listening between the lines. There are going to be things that are not said, but that are felt, that you can ascertain or discern from or infer from some of the things that are being said. And it will contribute to someone's emotional state, someone's perception of a topic or an idea. Maybe it is a belief system or certain values that are being conveyed in the middle of words that are actually being said. These are intangible factors. And then you have physical responses that happen. These are things that you need to look out for as well. Things like you might see someone's jaw clenching. You might sense an increase in heavy breathing or increase in heart rate. You might, see someone, they might have tunnel vision, or they might even have a tightness in the chest, or you might hear them say something about having butterflies in their stomach or like feeling anxious and anxiety. These are physical responses that can happen as a result of a conflict that is happening that you need to be on the lookout for. These are factors that you need to look out for. So we've looked at these 3 steps, and I've given you some things even at the beginning where I shared with you need to go back and look at, because they can contribute to your ability to A, recognize the conflict with conflict recognition, then B, review those conflicts, understanding what it is, the importance of what's going on to each party involved, and then lastly, managing the conflict by understanding those tangible, intangible, and physical factors that contribute to or become sort of a red flag for conflict in your area. Now, emotions change the way our brain works. Again, that fight or flight response is something that contributes to our emotional state. And our brain has a way of reacting to these things. And sometimes that results in conflict. It stirs up a lot of emotions, okay? But knowing these 5 conflict management styles won't necessarily fix things for you, but it'll help you regulate your reactions a little bit. But one surefire way to do a better job is to know these 3 operating systems that I talk about in this next video. Understanding your personal, professional, and social operating systems, creating those for yourself, is going to play a huge role in helping you to stop second guessing yourself. And remember, if you are interested in minimizing, mitigating conflict, Having a plan, a game plan. Remember, an operating system is something that helps you to function. It gives you guidelines to function better. So when you've identified those personal, professional, and social operating systems, it will help you manage conflict a little bit better. So I want you to watch this next video. Additionally, if this is anything that you want me to go into more depth with, I do this inside of my program, Project CEO. If you've made it this far, thank you so very much. It means you like me. So stick around and hang out with us. We are bosses. We are growing. So I want you to hit that subscribe button, click that notification bell so you don't miss an episode, but also go ahead and add your name to my waitlist for Project CEO. Doing so is not only going to get you some of those discounts that happen when we open those doors because you're already on the list, but it's also going to get you a free copy of my new ebook that is going to be coming out very soon. I don't have a name for it yet, but it is a comprehensive look at a lot of the topics that I talk about here on the channel, as well as worksheets that will help you work through them and understand them a little bit better. So if you're interested in learning best practices for being the leader of you so that you can then lead others and grow and scale in your life, career, and or business, this ebook is going to be very helpful to you. It's coming out later in the quarter, either the end of this quarter or the beginning of next quarter. So if you're on the list, you're the only ones that are going to get a free copy of this book. So I look forward to your comments. Don't forget, that's how I grow here. If you're not subscribed, if you're not commenting, I don't know what you want to hear. So make sure you do that. Get down in that description box below, watch the next video, add yourself to the Project CEO waitlist, and I'll see you back here again next week. Bye guys.